Today's message from Dr. Christian Sorensen was recorded April 14th, 2019, and it's titled Consciousness Transformed, Affirming, I am transformed by the renewing of my mind. And today we welcome the dynamic performance of Rosie Dawn Selwitz as our special musical guest artist, and who can be found on her Facebook page. Come visit us on our website at seasidecenter.org, and you can always join us in Encinitas, California on a Sunday sometime, where we always have great music, the spirited message, and a joyful, loving, vibrant community that await you.
Good morning, Seaside. All right. Ooh, yay. Got a good energy here this morning. It is my honor to introduce our guest artist, and today we have a relatively new artist. She was with us once for the first time last year, and she's with us again today, and I'm so grateful that she's here. She's a wonderful singer, and she has her own band, performs around town. It's called the Rosie Dawn Band, and she also has her own youth theater company. So she teaches kids about acting and singing, and she's here with us this morning. I'm so grateful. So let's give her a warm Seaside welcome. Rosie Dawn.
Great to be back. Such a blessing and honor. Me and all my friends, we feel we're all misunderstood. They say we stand for nothing, and there's no way we ever could. Now we see everything that's going wrong with the world and all they lead it. We just feel like we don't have the means to rise above and beat it. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. It's hard to change it when you're standing at a distance. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. Now if we had the power to bring our neighbors home from war, they would have never missed a Christmas, no more ribbons on the door. And when you trust your television, all you get is what you got. And when the only information, oh, they can bend it all they want. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. Waiting, waiting on the world to change. It's hard to make a change when you're standing at a distance, but we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. Yeah. On the sax. Yeah. Waiting on the world to change. Yeah. Waiting on the world to change. Oh, it's hard to make a difference when you feel like you're standing at the distance. But we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. I said we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. Waiting on the world to change. Oh, we keep waiting. Oh, we're waiting. Yes, we're waiting on the world to change. Thank you so much. Rosie!
That is Rosie Dawn. Woo! Picking a perfect song for this morning, waiting on the world to change, right? That's good. Perfect song for this morning's message, Consciousness Transformed. Actually, I stole the title from one of Goldsmith's books, Consciousness Transformed. It's a big 560-page book. It's actually pretty good. Anyway, that's where it came from, but it supports the keys to healing that I've been sharing with you through this Lent season, where we're embracing our greater good rather than trying to give something up and put our energy where we don't want it. I gave you 7 keys for creating healing in your life, and here they are. First one, the key is seeing as God sees. Then the next week was about forgiveness. The third key is about surrender. The fourth week was wholeness. And today, it's a little more action-oriented as opposed to consciousness transformed. The key is renewing of the mind. That's what we want to do, is be able to renew our mind, which was a lot about last week's message. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But the actual key is, if you want to experience consciousness transform, you've got to begin to embrace your greater good. You've got to renew your mind and embrace the greater good. And the consciousness begins to reveal itself in your outer world, because you begin to see, as Ernest was talking about, at least in his book, about the mystical aspect of consciousness, is you're seeing the presence of God that is already there. Even though it may not be appearing in that moment, the mystic is able to see that, and we had a wonderful experience of that this week. As Callie and I took our kid, Trevor, on spring break, and we didn't go to Florida or Cancun. We decided Grand Canyon was wild enough for us. And growing up in California, I had grandparents when I was a little kid about this size who lived in Las Vegas. So I made a lot of trips to Las Vegas in my day as a little kid, and they were never pleasant. You know, it was going through a hot desert. You'd leave early in the morning because cars overheated back then because the air conditioner may or may not work. And, you know, the desert was dry, and the plants that were out there were dead, and it just was not a nice experience, at least as a little kid. But as I got older, I started going through the Mojave Desert to go skiing in Mammoth. I did a lot of that through the winter. Once again, the desert is dry, it's dusty, and everything out there is dead. I won't even talk about Palm Springs because that is more of the same. But what was amazing this week is that we drove out into the desert, and I have never seen a green carpet that went as far as the eyes could see. All those dead sagebrush bushes that had no life in them were springing forth with leaves and life. All the way up the mountains, this green rolled across the valleys as if Spirit had rolled out the green carpet for us, and then threw in a few flowers. We've heard about the super blooms, but you had the wild lavenders on the side of the road, and the California poppies, and the orange and yellow daisies, and and it was truly spectacular. The actual desert was transformed. It was amazing how transformation can take place. Now, granted, we did get a lot of rain this year, and the rain, I'm sure brings some nutrients from the ground into the roots of those bushes or trees or plants or whatever was dead that was now alive. But what I believe is that it wasn't just the rain. There is something that was alive that was in those dead trees or bushes or shrubs or whatever's out there. Heaven knows, but there is life. And you can't see this life, but there is this life that is there. It was there before the rain. It is there after the rain. And it has always been there in that plant. And I just maybe haven't seen it. And what I got to realize as I was thinking about consciousness transformed, and the mystical consciousness is one who is able to behold the life that is in a situation that looks dead. That's what the mystic does. It doesn't pray to the plant and say, grow. It looks at that and sees what Spirit sees, as there is a life that has always been. And it doesn't matter if I had a bad thought that morning. Spirit's life was still in that plant. It doesn't matter if I did a horrible act the week before. When anything I did is not going to change the life that was there. In the Bible, I think it's Proverbs it's actually chapter 13, verse 8. It says, God has always been the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So it doesn't matter what I do. What matters is that I am able to see a life that is right there. And so as we enter into this this Palm Sunday, if you would, we are entering into a time in which in the Christianity culture there's a lot of excitement. Today is Palm Sunday, the day in which Jesus makes his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. And it is the beginning of the Holy Week that culminates with his teachings and life story on Easter. But I want to point out that this is a time of the year that all the great religions have been celebrating from antiquity, from the beginning of time. There has been a time of the season that people celebrate a new life, the greening, that life that has always been there, that has been hidden underneath the surface, and it's bursting forth once again. And there's a transformation that is taking place, but it's not because all of a sudden my prayers are working. It's all of a sudden that life is expressing itself that has always been there. And so the story goes in the Christianity and the Bible, is where we get our story. It's really written, for the Middle Eastern culture. And actually, other than Paul, all the stories in there were kind of, oral tradition passed down, and finally one day somebody wrote them down. They were not actually experienced and written down in the moment. It's an occult book, if you would, that has, fable and facts and symbolism. But what is valuable here is the story. Not whether it was factual or not, because we don't know. I mean, you don't know if you were there. It's kind of the same story that's been passed on through different religions. But what is valuable in what we believe in religious science or in the New Thought philosophy is that the Bible is filled with all these stories that when you recognize that they're relevant to you, and that it becomes your personal story that is relevant for every individual, it becomes valuable to you today. The stories in the Middle Eastern philosophies that are storytelling, they say, this may have happened, and maybe it didn't. But it doesn't matter because the symbol is what is real. The story is what carries the value. And so here Jesus comes triumphant into Jerusalem on this particular Passover season. And the story goes, they laid out the palm fronds. He had just recently that week raised Lazarus from the dead. So he had some good PR going for him in that moment. Some marketing was happening. The Pharisee, are on edge because all of a sudden you got to get rid of the evidence that this guy can actually raise the dead and heal. How do we get rid of Jesus? Because if they start following him, the Pharisee, who the Romans depend on to control this whole culture, is not working. And so you got this whole story comes in on the donkey, the palm fronds, people are singing Hosanna. And that's a beautiful story, the celebration of the culmination of this great work. You talk about a culture, a life transformed. It's amazing what's going on there. And then you've got the other side of the story that I share from George Lamza. And he was living over in Assyria at the turn of the 20th century, before World War I, speaking Jesus' language of Aramaic, seeped in the cultures. He translated the Bible not from Greek, not from Roman, not from the King James, but direct from the Peshitas or the manuscripts that are there. And so he brings in the idioms and the understanding. He said, Jesus' entry into Jerusalem isn't as triumphant as people were led to believe. He says that the Passover season, you had all the people from the country coming on in to enjoy the free Passover meal. And every year they had the newest motivational speaker or the spiritual guru coming in. And Jesus was just the one of that season. And he was hardly even noticed. And his disciples were upset, but kind of happy since the Pharisee weren't noticing him. And Jesus was pretty ticked off. He went into the temple, threw out the money changers. It's kind of, was not happening for him. And so here are two interpretations of the same story. Which one is fact? Which one is true? But what is valuable is the significance of the story in our life. You can take a triumphant approach or you can take a mediocre approach from the same story. And so what is valuable about this occult book, the Bible, is how you personalize it upon yourself. And so here comes this guy into town. The story is the teaching's going off. But what's important to realize is you've got to let go of your attachment of how you think it's going to be. These plants look dead. There is no life left in those plants. But you know what? If you can begin to have that mystical kind of seeing of beholding, you begin to let go of your attachment to your position. This is how the story went down. Or this is what it means that's going on in my life. But if I can let go of the attachment to how I think it ought to be or should be, I then become available for what can be a deeper life that is not seen, but a life that was before Abraham, a life that was the omnipresence that was the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, that is possibly can emerge within this moment. But I've got to be that space that is willing to let go of holding on too tightly. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a solid position on something. Don't get me wrong with that. But you want to hold on to it lightly, so you don't think the earth is flat. There is new evidence. Copernicus came out and said, hey, the earth is not the center of the universe. And, that just shook those that knew that was the truth. They actually burned Juno. What was his name? Giordano Juno. He was the science's martyr for stating to the world. The Inquisition took him, burned him, tried him, and then burned him, and said, that's not true. But what happens is life is emerging and growing, and you cannot stop the evolution that has got to take place when life is moving below the surface. Even if you can't see it with your rational mind, there is something that is there. Wonderful person who many of us are familiar with, spoke at Seaside, spoke for me first in 1984 in Ventura, Barbara Marks Hubbard. She made her transition this week, and bless her heart. Truly, she was one who was a futurist, an evolutionist, one who was on the cutting edge of what is possible. She had people looking beyond being stuck. She was talking about what we need is a new story. The old Christian story isn't going to unite this planet. You cannot go out and kill people and say, you got to believe like the way I do. There's got to be something greater. And a new story is seeking to emerge. And she was the first I read anyway, who talked about John Glenn when he popped out of the womb of the atmosphere of the earth. And we got that iconic picture of the blue marble hanging out in space. She was the first that I heard say that, that is going to be our new spiritual icon that will unite this planet. It's not the cross, it's not the star, it's not the sickle. It is going to be this planet that brings forth the new story that we're all brothers and sisters, and that we can ride triumphant on this new story into town and let go of what has been and what we have been defending. Another thing that Barbara Marks Hubbard used to talk about is crisis. And she said, never waste a good crisis. If something's stirring, get into it and figure out what is seeking to birth itself here, because there's nothing clean about birth. It's a messy situation. And as we enter this Holy Week and we think things are going a certain way, if I can let go of what has been and open up to what can be, I surrender and move with that flow, I begin to trust where this life stream is going to take me. At the Grand Canyon, it reminded me when I was in my teens, I had the joy of taking one of the rapid trips from all through it. 10 days from Lake Powell down to Lake Mead. Total isolation, no radios working there, no motors on those pontoons. You just float down there, and it was terrific. And one of the things they teach you early on is how to survive if you get thrown out of the raft. They actually let you swim some rapids so you get comfortable. And they say you go with the current, right? I mean, surfer dude, we know that. Riptide, you go with it, right, Brian? It's like, they take you out, you swim around. And so she tells the story, kind of Middle Eastern style. She says this story, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But it's the story that makes the difference. And that we may have heard about a couple of guys got up early one morning and were walking from their village to another village along the river. It was early, so there was still a lot of dew on the ground, and they were lost in their conversation heading to that other village. And they got to a steep slope, didn't see it, and they fell, or one fell and grabbed the other. Sounds probably what happened. And they both went into the water in these raging rapids, and the one guy who first started to fall just started freaking out, started swimming with all his power against the current, trying to get to the shore, swim upstream. He tried until he exhausted himself. He went down and under, and they never saw him again. Where the other one just kind of picked up his feet and allowed the current to take him downstream, used his hand occasionally to steer himself around a rock or a log. And finally, the rapids subsided. They dumped him right on the riverbank, and he got out, shook himself off. and found out to his surprise he was right next to the village he was going to anyway, And so when we are willing to trust, but it's hard to trust if you're not feeling good about yourself. You notice that? You got some things going on in your head that aren't quite so good. It kind of gets projected out into life. And some of our biggest challenges is that we just don't really maybe like ourselves as fully as we can be. And that doesn't work really well, telling God, oh God, I'm not worthy, what do you think of me? Look what I did, look what I've done. And putting yourself down is not the kindest way to evolve in your life. It doesn't really support one in their spiritual evolution if you keep putting yourself down. Because you know what? If you don't like yourself, you can't get away from yourself. You notice that? I mean, your boss, you can close the door, keep them out. At home, if you don't want to hang out with the kids because they're going wild, you kind of lock them out of your room. Your neighbor's kind of cranky. You can just dodge them, don't see them. Your crazy Aunt Alice, you just stay away from her. You can stay away from those that you don't like, but you can't do that with yourself. You go to bed with yourself, and next, you know what? You wake up with yourself. And you take a shower with yourself. You go to work with yourself. You vacation with yourself. And so, not liking yourself makes life pretty miserable. At least this is what I'm thinking. There's no wonderful entry into life when you're not liking yourself. You've got to begin to open up and let go of those pieces that look like they're dead, and you begin to believe that, this is the truth. Ernest Holmes, founder of religious science, who we heard talking about mysticism, you got to consciously court the presence. He says, and a beautiful prayer, David, of his, thank you. He said that you've got to make that great, when you make the great surrender to spirit, you don't lose anything worthwhile. You get rid of that which denies the power and the presence of the Spirit of God in your life. You got that? So you don't lose anything worthwhile. What you do is you deny that which keeps the power and the presence out of your life. You begin to be available. You begin to open up. You begin to be receptive. But you've got to apply it. You've got to use it. I mean, we know this, but there's a big difference between knowing something and taking the action. One of these days you've got to saddle up on that. They didn't use horses in those days, donkeys, because they represented being more surefoot. So Jesus entered in on a sure-footed donkey, colt. Anyway, and so you've got to make that entry and take the action. You can't stay on the outskirts and say, it's better if I don't go in. They're going to be happy or they're not. They're going to be what they're going to be. They're still going to be that life force and that current and that spirit that is moving right through the center of where you are. You've got to be willing to take the action. Rumi, the great Sufi mystic, he said, I spend my days stringing and unstringing my instrument while the song I came to sing never gets sung. Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's like, you got to get into it. You got to eventually get up off your meditation pillow, guys, and take some action with your life and with your world, and trust so you can be that place where you know. Because if you do catch that vision of something greater, it's only a vision until it's put into action. God has unlimited potential, but without you, Spirit's unexpressed. So I said, hey, Christian, man, behold this. Catch this vision. There really is wholeness here. There's life. Here's a new idea. There's this story from our culture of this is a long time ago. Maybe, I don't know, not 100, but quite some time ago, of a young clerk working in a hardware store. And here, the new kids, still this day, this is where the fresh ideas, because they don't have the attachment. It's supposed to look like this. And so the owner of this hardware store has all this old stuff he can't sell. It's been hanging around, collecting dust, worth nothing, can't return it in those days. And so the young kid said, hey, let's just put it in this table in the center of the store and just sell everything on that table for a dime. And that's when a dime was, worth something. And they went for it, and everything sold. And the owner of the hardware store thought, man, this is great. Let's do it again. So he went on to do it a few times. Now, this crazy kid came up with another idea. He said, hey, boss, I got a new idea. Why don't we open a whole store and sell only things for 5 and 10 cents? And the boss said, that's not going to work. Forget the idea. Let it go. So what the kid did is he went out and started his own store, which went on to be extremely successful, to which the boss would laminate later that every word of denial I gave Woolworth cost me millions of dollars, And so 5 and dimes are good, but it's not as if it's gone away. And they're not 5 and dimes, they're the 99-cent store now, but they're still going strong. It's probably worth the same amount, $1, a dime, in 100 years. I don't know. But it takes a willingness to catch the illumination of spirit, of the idea. And to be illumined means I'm not trying to get God to do something. When we're trying to send our prayer to make something happen, we're not illumined. We're in our mind trying to fix something, not seeing the life force that is moving through that dead plant. See, illumination is to be able to look at a dead plant and not have to pray because you see the life. That's actually pretty profound, guys. Yeah. I don't know if I can say it again. It was good. Let's see. Illumination is being able to look at that dead plant and not need to pray because you already see the life that is there. Hey, you got it twice. Never know when things are coming through if I can get it out a second time. I just opened my mouth and here it comes. So, where are we going? Illumination. We got Woolworth. I was going somewhere else good. Yeah, I'll just do a reading here. I'll tell you what. That'll get me back on track. I've been reading Mark Nepo. Some of you know, you probably can pick up one of his books in our bookstore. Lisa Lee knows I've been reading him. The Exquisite Risk in particular is what I'm reading. And it's just wonderful, just poetic, mystical, deep. I can only read, like a chapter at a time. There are a couple pages. And this one particular piece I want to read to you comes from when his father-in-law came out to him and said, follow me. And it was nighttime. And so they walk out past the cornfields, out of sight of the barn under the full moon. And Mark goes, so what are we doing here? And he said, we're going owling. Man, I've never heard such a thing. We're going owling, which is looking for owls. In case you know. And so they found a log and they sat down. And he went on to explain how you do this. And what Mark did is this is how he has internalized what the father-in-law told him all those years ago, which is a beautiful approach to catching spirit in that mystical state, in that meditative state. And so I want to share this with you, and it goes something like this. It'll probably go more like this if I put my glasses on. It said, you must venture out by yourself. You must trudge slowly, careful not to disturb the thing that beckons you. You must remain quiet and listen till your ears and your eyes are one. And then you must wait till there seems to be no life but the air you thought was wind. You must wait till the breath coming through you seems to be no longer yours. You must hold still inside. You must still your mind, for stillness outlasts loneliness, and great things that fly in the night will not stop for the lonely. You must venture out till it seems alone, in silence, careful not to fall prey to your want for company or audience. You must venture beyond your hope. And there, just as everything seems nothing, as the night can't grow any colder, as the dark can't isolate you any further, there, the sudden mass of feathers might appear above you, and you must hold very still while your heart excites. Whether it's a mass of feathers or whether it's the revelation of God, that is a wonderful approach to going there, but we must learn to keep our eyes open because we can't see if our eyes are closed. And when I'm talking about the eyes, I'm not talking about these physical eyes. I'm talking about the aspect of the totality of our being that sees beyond words, that is touched by the occult books, that is moved by the esoteric expressions of life, which is beyond that which is just the physical realm. We kind of couch our position more and more that we don't get in touch with that which is beyond the physical, the metaphysical, if you would, beyond the physical. It's as if I hear in the Western cultures, what we would say is the wind sounds like it's the voice of God, right? The wind sounds like it's the voice of God, where our Native Americans would say the wind is the voice of God. You see how we buffer ourselves from experiencing the connection? It's like it is. No, it is. The Western cultures would talk about the rivers or the water being, the blood it's like the blood of the earth, where the First Nation people would be talking about it is the blood of the earth. We buffer ourselves so we don't have the direct revelation and the expression and the Spirit of God, that we're not experiencing that life force. I had a dream the other night of my mom and my dad coming to visit me and to bring me some support and peace. And it was as if they were like right there. But you notice how I just buffered that? It's like as if. Why couldn't I just say my mom and dad came and visited me the other night? Would you think I'm weird? What is it that why do I need to say it's like, it's as if? What's the purpose? There was a lady from Tennessee shared the story about how she was in her kitchen cooking, and she heard like the muffled sound of her son, who was out in the backyard, fall to the ground, hurt and in pain. And she went running to look, and she realized that couldn't be the truth, because he's off, serving our country in the war. But she was moved to go to her knees and pray for her son. Only later, when he came home, did he share that at that exact time, in that moment in his day, that he was called into battle, he was caught in crossfire, he fell to the ground and yelled out to his mom for help and support. When we are willing to let go of what we think is the truth, we can begin to experience the expanding numinous dimensions of reality that are beyond the physical mind. But that's next week's message, going beyond the appearances. This week is entering triumphantly into the world in which we live. We entered into this world as a guest of the divine. It is the consummate host that has given us the love, the joy, the generosity, the abundance, and everything we need to incarnate in this human form so we can walk as a spiritual being in this world. It has all been taken care of, and we can enter triumphantly, or we can end up, this is miserable, they're not happy to see me. But what I know for sure is whatever is going on in our life here is our spiritual practice. Wherever we find ourselves and wherever we are bringing our awareness, and when I'm talking about awareness, I'm talking about being available to see as Spirit sees, which was one of our keys. The mystical consciousness is not directing your mind to something. The mystical consciousness that Ernest was talking about as consciously courting is an experience. You get that? The mystic isn't trying to fix the dead bush. It's not trying to fight the rapids. It is an experience of the divine made manifest in our world in a conscious way, which allows us to speak from a higher place if we're doing our prayers. But it's a listening. The mystic is a listener. It's a composer. It catches the music. It is bringing forth. That is what the mystic is. It is experiencing the divine sounds. It's not trying to see. Your eyes, you don't try to see. Well, maybe you might. But, in the younger days, we see. It's, hearing. You don't strain to listen unless you're trying to eavesdrop. Then you're trying to hear. But basically, you hear through your ears. You don't hear with your ears. You see through your eyes. You don't see with them. And as we allow ourselves to be that expression of God, we become the expression as Spirit walks in this world. And what we get to do through our spiritual practices is decide, am I going to see the presence of God here in this horror story, or is it going to be life that is in a dead bush that has been there yesterday, today, and forevermore? It has never changed, and it is not up to me metaphysically to make things happen, but rather to be a beholder and to a witness in the presence of God and approach life with a gentler expression of being the conduit for God happening, because only when I am in that good place am I a benefit to humanity. And so I want to end this day with a quote from Rabbi Hillel. And he is a wonderful wonderful Jewish sage and scholar, or was. And it being it's Passover week starting Friday at sunset, I just wanted to share with you something he said that I just love. He says, take care of yourself. You may never know when the world will need you. Take care of yourself. You never know when the world may need you. God bless you. We need you, all of us. Hey, let's keep it going as we bring Rosie Dawn back to our stage.
I was born by the river in a little tent, just like that river I keep running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know, yes I know, a change gonna come. Yes it is. I go to the movies and I go downtown, but they just tell me yes they do. Don't you come around. I know it's been a long time coming, but I know, yes I know, a change gonna come. Yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me, please. But he just winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there have been times I didn't think I was gonna make it. No, I didn't think I could. But now I think I'm able, yes I'm able to carry on, 'cause it's been a long, yes it has, a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come, 'cause it's been a long time coming, but I know, yes I know, yes I know, yes I know that a change is gonna come. I do,
That is Rosie Dunn. Woo! Rosie Dunn, knowing change is coming. Woo! Consciousness transformed. My goodness. Bracing the greater good. It's all the way it works. So